Alright, time to skim the flap on the nose, and I'm going to do this one here, which is the longest one, and it has 3 ribs in between the 2 outers, which are next up. I'm going to find the center of that mark on the top here, because we're going to cleco that on first, and that'll give us a spot to work from. So now with that mark, there's a 1/2 inch wide flange and we're 1/4 inch in, so we're right in the sweet spot. I'll give it a center punch and then we'll drill this hole. So now I just put the skin on here, and it wants to center up on that flat top. I checked the bottom to see how much, if there should be any overhang, because obviously you can just move the top of the rib anywhere you want. So it looks like it's pretty flush. Right about there will be good. And I can usually just hold this down tight and drill this hole. And I can cleco that. Alright, so now I'll do the same thing on the other end. So now what I need to do is take the clecos out. Take the skin off. And I need to make sure these 3 middle ribs are perfectly vertical. So I'll just use this square and give them a little bend until they sit straight up and down. So once those are vertical, this can go back on. Clecos can go back in. Okay, with it flipped over, you can reach right in here on the back side and you can see where this nose is, and I'm going to just put a line on each side of the nose rib here to mark its location. Do that to all 3 center ribs. Alright, now that that's marked on the inside, I can flip this back up, take the skin off. Alright, so now you can see you have a nice mark where the rib's going to hit, and all we need to do is find center and put a mark there. Alright, I've center punched it. Yep, I did center punch it, so now I can just drill. And I'll do the same thing in the other 2 positions. Alright, so now we've got all the holes for the top, or the nose, drilled. I'm going to put this back on the... Alright, so this is on, the 2 clecos are in, so now I'm going to flip it over and set it like that. So now what I'm going to do is, I have a mark there where that rib was originally, and all I'm going to do is tape it in place. And the tape will just help support it. I'm going to use my hand too, and then I can drill from the top down through it. So now I have it in place. I'm going to put a little tape on this rib. And then I'm going to line it up on that mark and tape it down. So now with it held in place, I can put some pressure on here, get my finger out of the way of the drill, and drill through from the other side. As long as I'm pushing away from the tape, it'll kind of hold it taut and it'll stay there. You know, you obviously can't push on the other side because the tape will just roll off. So now that can get a Clico. Alright, so all three, or all five, nose ribs are Clicoed in place. I'm going to turn this around. Now what I'm going to do is take a couple small clamps. What we want to do is even up this front edge right and left. And what's that going to do is, so if the ribs were actually like this or like that, if we even this up all around here, because this sheet is square, those ribs will be sticking straight up and down. So I just feel how much is overhanging on each end, and then get it even. Put a clamp right down here on the to the spar. And that'll lock it in position, so we don't have any racking. All right, so that's clamped, and I pushed down on the skin when I clamped it, so it'll be tight on this front side here. One other thing to do is roll the front nose around and make sure it's lining up where you want it. Because the next things we're going to do are going to stop you from being able to move it sideways. Alright, so I've turned the nose over again. You just reach in here with a marker now and mark this rib location. We did this after we did the nose, because if the nose moved around a little bit, this would be in a different place. But so now we mark it on both sides, and that'll give us our guides for the holes. Alright, so now with it turned over, we can see the rib location. And there are 3 rivets to get put in here. And I'm kind of lazy, so I have a few things that, this is 1/2 inch wide, and when I laid it out that was a little too tight. This is about 5/8. It works perfect for just doing these 2 outside rivet locations, since they're not very critical anyhow. So I just use it as my line, and then I do take a rule and just measure in between for the location of the center. Alright, so now I have marked out for this flat piece of the flap on the outside for the 2 ends, and on the inside we have all our rivet positions. So that'll give us all our holes for this face, and I'm going to center punch and drill all those now. Clico the top, or the nose. Clamp this bottom edge. I put a little match mark there where I had it so I could easily go back. Alright, I can start drilling. And you really can't move that rib around much. It's you know, connected here and connected here. So literally just start at the top and work my way down. So with those Clicos in that face, I need to work on this hole here. So in order to do that, I need to remove this Clico. And before I extend this line down, I'm going to look inside here and just make sure that when I look down the rib, the holes are in the center, nicely in the center. And they are at this one. So if they are, I'll just going to extend this line with a square. We're only going down at a 5/8 of an inch or so. It would be hard to get too much deviation. But if this was off one way or the other, I'll usually move it over a little bit and try to hit the center of that. Alright, so now these faces are clecoed, those flat ones. We're going to turn our attention to the curved section. So the first thing I got to do is get a mark here on where the rib lands. So I'm just going to look over the top of this metal and draw a line. So all I'm going to do is make a mark here in the center and then use a square and transfer that line up to the top. So once I have this mark here, I just push the skin back and then I transfer it up to this one. And then once I've got that, I just put a square on here. Now it's good to look down at the bottom there and see where you're landing on that cleco down there, but I haven't had any problems. Now I've got my line for my rivets and I can lay them out. With the hole spacing laid out, and I center punch the first row. I don't want to do the other ones yet. First of all, it'll be easier as you roll it around this curve to, you'll be on something solid you can center punch. But also, I'll look inside, and if the rivets not, or the holes aren't landing nicely where I want them, you can make minor adjustments. So, we'll turn it like this and start clamping it. There we go. So it's nice and tight. You can see the skin pulls down real nice along the rib. I can check the right to left, but really at this point you couldn't change it if you wanted to, because that was all set when the other side was done. So now I can just start drilling and calicoing the skin down, starting in the center, working my way out and up. With that first row drilled and clecoed, I'm going to turn this up, and I can look right in there and see where that first rivet landed, and make sure that I'm nice and centered on the flange. Those all look good. So that skin's complete. We don't do the spar right now because there's some stiffeners and things that go on there. So I can take and do the other three. Nose skin's completed on the left and the right, so I think next thing's up is some ribs. So I measured the corners for the rib distance and went in Fusion 360 and drew up these corner brackets, or gussets really, for this is for the right corner, top and bottom, and then I'll send it over to the CNC router and have it cut them out. And there we go, 2 corner brackets, gussets. Clamp it down. So this stiffener gets a flange there on the hole, and so I experimented a little bit and I 3D printed a ring with an angle, 45, that'll fit in there, and then a female for it to see if I could flange it with this. worked pretty good. So I'm going to put this doubler in that goes right here on the flap hinge location. So the first thing I need to do is get rid of these nose ribs. Just going to drill. There's no ribs on the other side of these here. So we'll just drill through the holes in the spar after clamping. So first up, a little deburring action. So these have just been drilled, and this hasn't been deburred or prepped, so I want the plate to sit down flat when I drill it to it. Pull acetone to get rid of my previous drawings and instructions so I can put some marks to where center is. So now I can line this guy up looking down the holes. And just make a couple marks out here on the outside. Now I have my references for where it needs to sit. So now I'm just going to extend this line up because I'm going to want to slide it up away from the radius of the spar so it'll be laying on the flat part. So that stations back together and it has its doubler in place. So now I can put my ribs in. Alright, so I'm going to put this, drill this rib to that attach angle, but before I do, I'm going to square it up with the spar, and then I've got this little block. I'm going to screw it to the table. Alright, I removed the other ribs that were over here that would be in the way, and I got a nice long bit, and I'm going to put some, or drill this rib to its attach angle. Alright, so now I've got all the ribs attached. I've got the doublers in. So I'm going to put the nose skin back on, and then I can start working the rivets for the spar and then the stiffeners. But before I do that, I'm going to make sure everything's straight and square. So the way I've got this set up is I made sure the table is flat. It's also level, but that's not really what we care about. It's flat. I string line this main spar here, and then I've squared it to this edge, so I can use this edge for this rib. Down the other end, I use the square and inscribe the line. And once I string line this, I match marked it down on the table so that I could go back. So right now I'm going to put everything back to its marks. Just loosen up all these little clips and then tighten them back down. Alright, so now starting from the center of the flap, I put the center stiffener support here, gusset, whatever, in the middle. And I put a line down each, all the way down the top of each skin, showing where the center of the spar is. I've transferred that up onto this stiffener too. So now what I'm going to do is, we have to put a rivet in through both skins, the spar, and the rib. So I've marked that location. I transferred the center of the rib up, and this is the center of the spar. So I'll drill those, cleco those, and then do the couple rivets to go between there, and then I'm going to work my way this way. So I actually got ahead of myself a little bit when I drilled these two, because this goes on here, but no big deal. I will just slide it underneath and I can drill through the holes and get the holes in the right place and then move it to the top. So that's it for the top of the spar. So now I'll rivet down these corner gussets and the center gussets, and that'll finish the top. So I've removed now the clecos down this face and here. I've left the one that actually goes through into the rib, because that's locating it this way. And the reason I removed these, and I did it on all three, is I'm going to flip it over and I want to be able to lay it off the edge of the table to clamp the ribs down again. So with the flap turned over and the ribs are all been squared up and everything's been squared and clamped back down, I will start clecoing the spar on the bottom, and starting here with the center gusset, and it'll be the same thing as before, only I don't have to fight the curvature, so I don't need 8 main clamps. So on this corner gusset, all I'm doing is I can look down through this gusset and this rib and see that I am lined up on all the holes below. I've been drilling the top up here first, just because I find it easier. I've got all my marks and layout in there that are continued over from earlier. And then I just slide this guy under it. And I can line them all up where I want them, and then just drill through those holes, and then I'll put them on top where he belongs. But now all the gussets, everything has been clecoed and drilled and clecoed. Before I can take it apart and deburr and dimple and prime it and get it ready to be riveted, all these nose clecos need to be opened up to 1/8, because they're going to be pop rivets. Think about what I was going to say. All done clecoing and drilling this flap. All the pieces are where they need to be. Disassembling and labeling. Now with everything deburred and dimpled and primed, I'm riveting the nose ribs and the rib attach pieces back onto the flat spar. So now I'm going to clamp this spar back where it was before. I've got marks on this table of where everything was, so you can put it right back. It should all be straight. I'm going to put all the ribs on, and then I'll take them off one by one, rivet them, put them back on. We'll actually decouple because you need to make room to get in there, but that way I know everything's in the same place and nice and flat. So in order to rivet in these tail ribs, I remove the rib next to the one I'm working on, and I'm just working from one end to the other end so that I have room to get this squeezer in. This squeezer has two different size heads. I put a smaller one on there, and I found I can put it in this hole and actually get to all four rivet locations. I just finished riveting all these tails on, and it went okay. I started on the root and I worked my way down to the tip, but I think when I do the next one I'm going to start in the middle right here and work that way, and then this one I'll work that way, because when you try to rivet across this rib attach angle back here, it puts the riveter at quite a weird angle, and it was a pain in the butt. So if I start here, work that way, and start that one and work that way, I think that will work better. I started putting the nose skins back on, and to do that I have to prep them a little, so I had to prime them and dimple them, and then I'll put them in place. Oh, and also roll the edge over so that they will sit down a little nicer with the fabric. So now with it turned over, it's hanging over the table quite a bit because of all the clecos on the bottom. Everything's on there except for the corner gussets and the center gusset. With it turned over, I clamped all the ribs down. That'll hold it in place, and then also I checked to make sure they're all perpendicular to the spar. Right now they're only held by a couple rivets up here, so they do flop around quite a bit. As we start to lock them down with the rivets, I kind of like them to be straight. So now with the gussets installed on the top, and as much as I can clecoed around the front, I'm going to start riveting on the nose, work my way around the front, and then work my way around the bottom. So all the pop rivets on the nose are complete, except for there's one flush one I put in the bottom, and I'll get that when I turn it over. So now I'm going to start on the flush rivets, work my way down the spar. So one thing that's come up that your life could be a little better if you do is this rib I put in towards the tip, which most all the ribs point towards the tip, but actually that is not where it's supposed to be. The plan actually shows it facing the other direction. And if it was facing the other direction, you could get a squeezer in here and squeeze these, which I can't. So these second rib in, if you have pointed towards the center, it'll make your life a little easier. I mean, no big deal, I'll just buck them from the other side, but so these are the rivets that couldn't get squeezed. So there's about 6 down here, well 5 there, 2 here, and about 6 down on that end. So now I set it up here vertical, and it'll be really easy to get in there with a bucking bar and a rivet gun on this side and buck all these. So now those few rivets have been bucked, and it's time to turn it over I looked down the tips of the ribs and they're all nice and flat, so I'm not going to worry too much about getting it all clamped to the table. And then I will add in the stiffeners, or the corner supports, the gussets, whatever, and start riveting. I finished hand squeezing the rivets for the bottom side. So on this side, I've got 17 that need to be bucked by hand. So we'll do that next. So here's the final result. I've got both flaps completed. And they're not both rights. There's actually a right and a left, so 2 thumbs up to that. I'll move on to the ailerons.